Hey there. So there's a very particular demographic of women who reach out to me often and say something along the lines of, shit, Stace, your videos make a whole shit ton of sense, and I am a mother of adult children, and I fear that I have passed down something to my children that I don't want to be passing down. So essentially I have, whether I have the mother wound myself or not, created it in my children. I see the ramifications of that. Is it too late for me now? Is it too late for them? So somebody reached out to me and she had a story that I think a lot of us mothers can relate to if we're being honest with ourselves. And it was that she got pregnant with her third child at a time that she was incredibly stressed out. She had a family member die and she just wasn't ready to have this kid. So in utero, her experience as a mother was, while she had a child in utero, was one of constant negativity and just like not wanting this child. So he comes out and he's severely autistic. So she writes to me and says, she understands that he's been imprinted and she's kind of blaming herself for the way that he took that imprint on. And she's looking at his autism as a disability, and she's blaming herself for it. So I want to share with you what I said in response to her, because a lot of us have this, how can I go back and undo what I've done? And we're doing so in present day by bringing the past into the present. And what happens when we do that is essentially, so say in this woman's case, she is feeling guilty about the fact that she didn't want this kid. And she spends her life feeling guilty, feeling like he feels that. So what the energy body will do, will want to overcompensate for that, right? So if we're in our egos about our guilt will guide us to overcompensate for the things that we feel guilty about. But what's true is that we're basically at a baseline of deprivation. So we're looking at the thing that we feel guilty about. So in this case, it's her son. And she's going, I feel guilty because I created him to be this way. He feels what I've done to him. And she's looking at him as if he symbolizes her guilt. And then she'll try to overcompensate for that guilt. And what that reiterates to him, psychologically, he'll learn to use it because that's just what we do. But what it reiterates to him, to his energy field, is that actually he is something that should feel guilty, that is shameful. And he can see and feel, whether he knows it or not, his mother's energy of trying to overcompensate for that sensation of not wanting him. So what happens then is that actually she's bringing the past into the present and overcompensating for the past. Even if she's done all of the things right, like this particular email, she says, I've done all of the right things, I just know that he feels this. How can I stop this? Is it too late? And I am fortunate enough to work with mothers who are brave enough to do this work, and I often hear people say something along the lines of, no wonder why my mother didn't do this work. Like it's so hard to look at yourself, to sit with yourself, to see the patterns for what they are, to get into them, own them, instead of letting them own you so you can actually change them. It's hard freaking work. So if you are wondering if it's too late and what you have to do to change your lineage, I want you to know that wonderment alone is 20 steps ahead of some lineages. So you are already, just by even having the question, healing a lineage. So your awareness that you're carrying this baggage that you no longer want to pass on is a huge weight lifted off of what needs to come off of you in order to get to your core. So that being said, the way to stop the cycle is not to put your daughter in therapy, put your son in therapy. It's to do the work. I get so many emails from mothers who want me to work with their daughters. And I'm so much more passionate about working with the mothers, because we are mothers. We hold this creative energy, and our daughters are going to be mothers, and they're going to hold this creative energy. But to just pass the torch before we've actually taken the torch, it skips something in us, and then we'll always be missing that part of ourselves. So the work lies in us being willing to not, because in that search for like, how can I heal my kids now that I've screwed up, we're going, how can I bring my newfound light into the darkness? Instead of what the work requires of us is actually to like collapse the darkness into the light, to like push past the resistance of like, this really sucks, this like, I don't want to see myself in this way, to push past the resistance of like, ugh, I don't want to be here in this physical body in this way, and to let it all kind of fall while you're pushing through resistance, and then just letting it, that void that's created by that like density, collapse into the light. That's what we're doing. We're like bringing our own dark back here instead of just letting pieces of our light somewhere else in the darkness. We're like collapsing the dark so that we can be the light here, like right here. So we can benefit our children by being the ones willing, not just to say, oh, I don't want to pass this on to my kids, but to do the work to actually gather yourself so that you have a self, so that that self can write the story and what you're going to pass on to your kids, instead of just going, you know, I know that I've done this subconsciously and by default. What can I do now to help them? They need us to help ourselves so we have a self. And if we were a different personality type, if we were not, you know, the codependent empath doesn't have a sense of self. So if we were a self-seeking personality type, in the sense that we're just like trying to self-gratify, that'd be a different story. But we have to literally unravel the projections that we have built around ourselves, that we said, this is me, this is what they've projected onto me, so this is my identity. When we move that away from ourselves, we have to gather the right materials that we want to build our own identity with. And when we have that self, and it feels really aligned to our truth, and not just like, I built this identity to like be a wall and a shelter for myself to not feel pain, but like it's established in a sense of your own absolute soulful truth, then your children will literally just pick up the pieces. Like that was her ultimate question. She said about DNA and genetic coding. Like our DNA, if I spit somewhere, it's hanging out there. Like my DNA, I leave trails everywhere I go with DNA, with my light body. And if my DNA changes at any given point in time, wherever it is in the universe, it's going to change with, like if I spit out there and that happened 3 weeks ago and my DNA is still there, when I change here, the DNA out there still changes. When my DNA changes, and I switch the blueprint with intention, and I get out of my own way long enough to do it, when my DNA changes, my DNA is in my children. So naturally, their blueprint's gonna shift by our own shifting. So it's not about how can I help them, how can I overcompensate for them by doing something. It's in the art of really doing the work in here that the shift will naturally happen out there. And this is the only place we can do the work. So no, it's not too late, but it doesn't start with like overcompensating for something that you didn't know better from before. It starts with doing the work to forgive yourself for that reality and to learn to become yourself in this one. So I hope this was helpful. And if you are brave enough to admit that you've left your kids with a mother wound, thank you. Bye, guys.